One of the wonderful things about speaking is the ability to create scenes. And this is something that not all speakers do, right? Have you ever heard somebody tell a story where someone said, well, this happened, and then this happened, and then this other thing happened, and then, you know, my wife said I should join this gym, and then I joined the gym, and then I decided to quit the gym, and then I decided to buy a gym, you know. So, the best stories are created in scenes. And this is where having been a screenwriter sort of really helps me. And if you've been involved at all in theater or comedy, you sort of have this idea of creating this scene on this stage. So what's in a scene? So obviously we have a setting. So you notice when I started the Gilligan's Island story, I started out with a setting. I started out with the Gene Roddenberry building at Paramount Pictures. Scenes should always have, I shouldn't always, but most often have a very strong setting. People need to know where they are. They need to be grounded, right? And then, obviously, if there's more than one person talking, you need to have dialogue. So the tricky thing about dialogue is when you're doing a story and it's just you and you're trying to do two people speaking, sometimes people get confused, right? So there's a couple of little techniques that you can use. One is if you have two people speaking, you have one person speaking like this, and then when the other person speaks, they speak over here. But to get even more entertainment value out of it, if you want to, you know, again, think like a theater director or a movie producer, you know, think in terms of who the characters are. Give those characters different mannerisms or different voices, particularly if you're telling a long story involving two people. If you have one person very sort of ramrod straight, and then another person who's very loose and is talking like this, you know, it just helps not only separate those two characters, but it gives a story some life, right? So dialogue, important. This is where, obviously, if you're any good at doing different voices, try on a different voice. And it doesn't have to be crazy, but it just has to be a little different from your speaking voice to give that idea that there's another person there talking. So we've talked about characters. Characters are really important. Some scenes may only have one character. But if you bring other people into the story, just think about them for a second. What is it that they bring? Is there a purpose? Can this person be comic relief? Can they be a way to bring in humor? So always be thinking of that, thinking about who your characters are, how they're acting, and how they sound. And then the last bit is using one of the most powerful parts of story, which is this virtual reality aspect. So I want you to think of when you listen to a story or you even read a story, like just picture yourself reading a book. What you're doing is you're analyzing printed characters, which then become sounds, which then are interpreted in your mind to be words. But what's really happening in your mind is it's there. It's almost like you're living it, right? It's this movie playing inside your head. Stories have this incredible power to actually pull us into them. And how powerful would it be if you're trying to convince someone of something, because we're all salespeople, to actually put that person in your shoes or in another character's shoes, in the shoes of a taxi driver, feeling what they feel, seeing what they see, hearing what they hear. So when you have time, when you have a story that you have time to develop, think about, when you're setting the scene, well, how did it look? What were the sounds? How did the character feel? And the more that you can bring those little sensory aspects in, the more people are going to actually sense that as virtual reality, bring themselves into the story. It will make it more memorable, because what we find is when people get sucked into a story, if I'm talking about how something looked, if I've got you sucked into the story, the part of your brain that accesses visual data will light up. So it'll be almost as if you're seeing it. And if I bring in sound, it'll be almost as if you're hearing it. So suddenly you have more and more areas of the brain lighting up. And the more areas of the brain that light up, the more chance that person is going to remember your story and be affected by it.